Math. Even explaining math is brutal. This video is going to be about CBD hemp product formulations. I'm going to go over basic recipes like a simple 2-ingredient tincture or a lotion, and then as the video progresses I'll go into more difficult recipes and formulations that include several distillates with several different cannabinoids. So here we go. Alright, let's say in this example a customer comes to me and she says, I want 100 units of 1,000 milligrams CBD tincture with no THC, and I want it in a 1-ounce vial. Okay, first thing we need to do is identify what ingredients are going to be in this recipe. We have, in this case, because it is no THC, we're going to use a broad spectrum distillate. And for simplicity's sake, let's say the broad spectrum distillate that I have is 80% pure. That's 80% CBD is in that distillate. And the main ingredient here is going to be MCT. All right. The second thing we need to do is calculate the quantities of each ingredient. All right. If you're making cookies, you need how much sugar, how much eggs. It's the same concept here. So the total volume of each unit we know is going to fit in 1-ounce vials. That's what the customer wants. And because you'd think like, oh, 1 fluid ounce is going to be 28 grams. Oil and water aren't exactly the same. So 28.5 grams might be good for water. In this case, we're going to use 27.5. We also need to transfer or calculate the distillate in grams. So from milligrams to grams. That's simple. We also need to account for the purity of the distillate, as well as give ourselves a 5% buffer for any measuring error or lab analytical error. I would rather give this client a CBD tincture that is 1,050 milligrams of CBD instead of 950. Right, so here's a simple equation. 1,000 milligrams is equal to 1 gram. Again, at 80% purity. The way we find that out and how we calculate this out is, put simply, if the distillate is at 80% and you put 1,000 milligrams into a tincture, the test value is going to come back at 800 milligrams in theory. All right, so we want to calculate for that 20% that is anything but CBD. And the way we do that is if you want to get 20% of 1,000, you'd multiply it by 0.2. And to skip a step, we're going to multiply by 1.2, right, to include itself in an additional 20%. So 1 gram times 1.2 is going to give us 1.2 grams of CBD. Now 1.2 grams of CBD in 1 unit is going to come out to 1,000 milligrams. But we also want to give ourselves a buffer, that 5% that I'd mentioned. To do that, we do 1.05 times 1.2, and that's going to give us 1.26 grams of broad spectrum distillate per unit. All right, now it's off to MCTs. I'm going to say MCTs. Technically, it's not wrong. Anyway, MCT volume in grams. I know grams is weight, volume is space, but please bear with me. I'm just going to kind of use them interchangeably, and I'm going to say volume in grams. So to do this, we need to take the total volume, which we calculated up here to be 2.75. We want to subtract that by our CBD in grams, which is 1.26. That's going to give us 26.24 grams of MCT per unit. And the last thing we need to do is multiply all of this out and attribute to the 100 units, right? Now we know how many of each ingredient, how much of each ingredient is in a unit, multiply that out. But we also want to give ourselves a 3% buffer. The last thing that you're going to want is to be like, put all this work in, you're finished, do your final count, it's 99. So 3% typically works, especially for tinctures. 100 times 1.03 is going to give us a 3% increase. That's 103 units. We write that down. And now 103, multiply that by each ingredient to get MCT. Here we go. 2,702.72 grams of MCT in a final product. 103 times 1.26. That's going to give us 129.78 grams of CBD. Mix those all together. Split it up. Send out a test. And you've got yourself a happy client. So that was a really easy, basic CBD formulation. Next, it's going to be a little bit trickier. We're going to go into not so even or round numbers, and maybe even we'll throw in a couple extra ingredients. So far, if you've liked this video, found any sort of benefit to it, it really helps my videos and my channels if you were to give this video a like. It's very much appreciated. Okay, now that we've gone over a simple recipe, let's get complicated. By the way, it's been a couple of months, so I see a Christmas tree. Merry Christmas. Let's get into it. Okay, now that we've gotten a simple recipe down, we're gonna make it complicated, and this is about as complicated as I've ever seen, and I've been in the industry for many years. This customer came to me asking for a very specific set of cannabinoids, a very specific CBD, very specific CBG, THC needs to be in a certain place, as well as CBGA. They wanted it exact. Now we're going to go into how do we get those exact numbers with using different distillates. Right? So if you're watching this video, I'm assuming you already know what distillates are and the lab values associated with every single cannabinoid. So I've broken this down into 6 simple steps. Some of the steps are complicated, but reading them out, they sound pretty simple. Right? So we're going to determine the weight of the capsule and its contents. I'm going to go over them briefly, and then we'll go into them more in depth. We want to understand the target cannabinoid profile, meaning what does the customer want? In this case, they want 25 milligrams of CBD, 25 of CBG, 5 of CBGA, and 1.5 to 2 THC. We want to create a table with all the distillates that are going to be used. That's going to help us keep track of what we're doing and maintain accuracy. Right? We want to find the percent of concentration of each distillate to make our target profile. Next, we want to calculate the total volume of each ingredient for the total recipe. And lastly, we want to condense all of that data into one concise place that we can refer to when we're actually mixing up our ingredients. So now we're going to go over step 1. We're going to determine the weight of the capsule and the capsule's contents. To do this, we first need to weigh empty capsules, and here what I've done is I've weighed out 5 capsules and determined the weight is 0.8 grams. So I'm just going to divide the total by the number of capsules I weighed for an average of 0.16 grams, and that's empty, nothing, just the head and the body of the capsule. Right, I did disclose that this client wants capsules, if you didn't determine that already. They want a capsule, not a lotion, not a tincture, but that's it. Right, so now we want to fill the capsule with hemp seed oil. That's going to be our carrier. And I've weighed 3 full capsules and determined that it's 2.6 grams for 3 of them. Divide that out, we get 0.86 grams per capsule, and that's full. Now we're going to subtract this from that, and that leaves us with 0.7 grams of contents per capsule. I always like to add a little bit of a buffer. I don't want to make too little, so I give myself some room. I'm going to add 10%, 10% of 0.7. I just do 1.1 times 0.7. That gives me 7.77. That is 0.7 plus 10%. So now let's go over our target profile. And I did briefly mention these again. Here they are written out so you can see them. Very specific numbers here. And this is per capsule, not per container. And this is the most complicated step by far. It can be overwhelming, but I've tried to make it as simple and as clear as I possibly can. If you have any questions with this, please reach out to me in my messages or at Just Drew It. I'll write it here on Instagram. Okay, that's a 1 at Just Drew It. That's not a plus sign, that's a T. Well, that looks like a cross. Anyway, Just Drew It. The I is a 1. I'm beating this horse to death here. Here we go. So I've color coded it to make it a little bit easier to follow and to digest. To go over this table, I've called it mixed distillate table. We're mixing a bunch of distillates, very scientific. We've got 4 distillates, each with its own cannabinoid profile that I've gone ahead and got lab values on, so I know exactly what the cannabinoid concentration of those oils are. Each column represents a different oil. Each row represents a different cannabinoid. All right, so we have CBD percentage of this CBD dominant oil is 83.56. Its CBG is 0.4. CBJ non-existent. THC is 2.42, and etc. with this CBG dominant, this CBGA dominant, and this THC dominant oil. All right, so because we want this as our target, let me go down here so you can see the whole thing. We're looking for 25 milligrams of CBD, and this is really guesswork. I mean, if you're a mathematician and you know how to do this easily, please share it with me, because this is complicated stuff. So here, to keep it a little bit easier, I've divvied them up into colors, and I already have the answer here. So we're going to go over the answer. If you want to try it and you haven't looked at the answers already, pause it, give it a whirl, and then come back. So we'll just call this one blue. Our blue is going to be 43% of the total mixed distillate. All right, 43%. Our red is going to be 36.5%, 19% purple, and 1.5% green. Now, if we do all of that, here's the equation that you're going to need to calculate what your final mixed distillate concentrations will be. So we're going to do 83.56% times 0.43. We're going to do 3.8 times 0.365, and so on and so forth. You're going to do that with each cannabinoid. That's going to give you 37.55%. Right? You're going to do the same thing. Instead of using 83.56 in this equation, you're going to be using 0.4. Here, instead of 3.8, you're going to be using 84.5, etc. Instead of 1.1, you're going to be plugging in 31.16, etc., etc., going down for each cannabinoid percentage. When I'm doing this, it's really trial and error. I will start with a rough estimate of where I think I am. For this particular case, I started at like 60, 40, 5%, and whatever the math turns out being. And you adjust that moving forward. And I know this is complicated. It's even complicated for me to try to explain it to you. But we're very much going to need the next step here. To recap, we have mixed 4 different distillates of varying percentages to create this one distillate. And here are our percentages. Remember, I guessed these. When in reality, when you guess yours, you'll have to make adjustments. I made several adjustments in order to reach this concentration. So the final oil is going to be 37.5% CBD, 36.9 CBG, 7.5% CBGA, and 2.5% THC. The rest is kind of like a zero space. So now, how do you turn this percentage into what you're going to get when you put this oil into a capsule? How do you really specify, okay, I want CBD 25 milligrams per capsule? Well, there's your start. That's how you start. Let's focus on one cannabinoid at a time. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on our CBD. So we want 25 milligrams. That's what the customer wants. And here's how we get that. So we need to take this number here, 37.5. Trust me, you multiply it by 10. Multiply that number by 10, 375 milligrams. Here's the logic behind it, if you really want to look through that. So you're going to divide the milligrams by the expected dose. In this case, we want 25 milligram per capsule. So 25 divided by 375 milligrams of CBD is going to give us 0.0667 grams of CBD. And please note that it is grams of CBD, not milligrams. So we are now in grams when we're talking about 0.0667. That is the amount of mixed distillate that will be in each capsule. Okay, so we need to calculate that for the rest of them. And here's where you're gonna do your trial and error, right? So you'll know the CBD will be correct. No matter what, you're dividing by 25. Your CBD will be correct no matter what. It's the following cannabinoids that may be completely off in your guesswork. So here's how we do that. We take 375 and multiply it by 0.0667. That creates 25 milligram. Obviously, we knew it was going to be 25 milligrams. Here's the rest of them. You take 369, and multiply that out, 0.0667. We get 24.6. Our main goal, remember, is 25 CBG. 24.6, I'll take it. Okay, now we have 76 milligrams, right? 7.6, multiply that by 10. 76 milligrams times 0.0667, that's going to give us 5 milligrams. Our target, remember, 5 milligrams. That's okay, that's good. And we take 25, that's a typo, 25 milligrams of THC and multiply that by 0.0667, and that gives us 1.6 milligrams THC per capsule. In this example, it is correct. we're good to go. We have 4 cannabinoids that all match the required levels. In reality, again, when you guess, all of 3 or less, at least 3 will be wrong. If your, let's say your CBG is 75, and everything else is also too low, you have to change it, right? Go back to these percentages. Here's your equation. Take away from your CBG and add to a different distillate. And keep changing them around. You have to do this calculation with your new percentages over and over again until you get it right. It is a lot easier to do this on Excel. So if you have Excel, you can plug in your formula here and then drag and drop it down. If you find this video useful and you want me to show you how to do this on Excel, let me know in the comments and I will be happy to do that. If you want help in general and you're like, okay, this sounds great, help, just reach out to me. I'd be happy to help as well. So now that we have our mix, we know the percentages of our oil, we need to calculate the recipe. We need to actually start mixing things. Before we do that though, we need to know how many capsules we're making. This particular customer wants 30 capsules per bottle. In 100 bottles, that's 3,000 capsules. I always calculate a 3% buffer, so we're going to multiply 3,000 by 1.03, and that gives us 3090. Next, we have to calculate the grams of each ingredient to complete the order. Multiply 0.0667, right? We got that up here, by 3,090, and that's going to give us 206. Now we need to find the percent of each distillate that we're adding to this recipe. So we're going to take 206 and multiply it by 0.43. And let's go back here. And why is it 0.43? Because the oil that we made is 43% this ingredient. It is 36.5% this ingredient. It's 19% this ingredient and 1.5% this ingredient. So we're going to take all of those values and multiply it by 206 to give us these here. Okay, I hope it's making sense. If it isn't, ask questions away. So now it's time to move on to the terpenes and the hemp seed oil. The terpenes, the client wants 5 milligrams. We're going to find a 10% buffer for this one. It's not 10%. We want to make sure that we're well above. I'd rather be above than below. Multiply 5 milligrams by 1.1. That's going to give us 5.5. 5.5 in each capsule. So we want to multiply that by the total capsules that we're making, which is 3090, and that gives us 16 grams. 15,900 milligrams converts to 16 grams. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing with the 3 milligram of beta-caryophyllene. 3 times 1.1, 3.3. 3.3 times total number of capsules equals 10 grams total. Now, to calculate the total volume of hemp seed oil that we're going to need, actually for sake, we're going to add a little extra here. So I wrote it is 16, but I'm going to keep it 17 because all the math going forward fits that in. So It's going to be 16. It's 17. Ugh. Math. Even explaining math is brutal. Okay, so now we need to calculate how much hemp seed oil we're going to need. To do this, we're going to take 0.77. That's how much we can fill in each capsule, and multiply that by 3,090. And that's going to give us this number here. This is the total volume that will fill all of the capsules that we need. Now we need to subtract from that the terpene volumes and the volume of the distillate. So our total volume, subtract the alpha-pionine, limonene, and beta-carotene, and also subtract the distillate, and that gives us 2,129 grams of hemp seed oil. Now, last step is to condense all of that information that we have into a digestible table. And here we go. That's your recipe. I hope you found that useful. And if I did an awful job at describing that, please let me know, and I'll give it a second go. This is confusing. It's confusing to me. Every time I look at it, as you can see, I was crossing things off. There's a lot of places to make mistakes. Double, triple check your work. Go through it as if you were teaching somebody else how to do it, and you'll find errors. You fix those. The last thing you want to do is make all of these capsules, send out the test, and realize they're wrong. So before you fill any capsules, send the oil off, and that way you can make any adjustments before you start filling thousands and thousands of capsules. So thanks for watching. I'm Andrew, and hopefully I'll be talking to you in the direct message arena. What is that? The platform. In the direct message, in the comments, or on Instagram @JustDrewIt.